Well, good morning to the CDO Magazine audience. I want to welcome you to the CDO Magazine interview series. My name is Kirk Ball. I'm the Executive Vice President and Chief Information Officer for Giant Eagle. And I also happen to be on the editorial board of CDO Magazine. And I'm very excited today to be joined by Brian Stephen and Jay Marshall of Neuromagic. And Neuromagic is an AI startup delivering on the promise of software-delivered AI, helping customers to simplify their machine learning deployment so they can use compute-heavy models like computer vision and natural language processing in a cost-efficient and scalable way on existing CPU infrastructure. Brian and Jay, welcome. I'm excited to spend a little bit of time with you today and learn a little bit more about Neuromagic. So Brian and Jay, whatever order you want to go in, why don't the two of you give us a little bit of sense of both of your backgrounds and what role you play at Neuromagic?
Sure. I'll start. This is Brian. Hi, everybody. Thanks for doing this, Kirk. Yeah, I grew up as a software developer inside a big enterprise proprietary company, and it was a great first job out of college, and it's really kind of what turned me towards actually thinking enterprise infrastructure was fun. And I think to this day that probably defines best who I am. Is always been working in enterprise infrastructure. Still think it's fun. I think it's actually more interesting now than it was even back then. Went on from that proprietary company to a company called Red Hat, and then our job there was to how do you really commoditize enterprise infrastructure and take it from being expensive and frictionful into the world of open source subscription software and commodity hardware like Intel back then, and then from there on to Google and building their cloud product again, really just with emphasis on how can the application of cloud-based technologies transform enterprise, both not just technically, but from an operational standpoint. And then obviously today here, lucky to be at Neuromagic.
Awesome. Jay, why don't you give us a little bit about your background, and then we'll dive into the Neuromagic story and the value proposition.
Yeah, thanks, Kirk. So Jay Marshall, I head business development here at Neuromagic. First 15 years of my career were spent actually as a software engineer and an enterprise architect, building mostly at-scale Java apps. Actually cut my teeth in RPG on the AS400 back in the early 90s, oddly enough. Go from that to AI is pretty interesting. And in the past 10 years or so, I've mostly been in principal technologist roles, both for kind of big tech firms like Google and Amazon. And recently joined Brian here at Neuromagic within the last year or so. So again, thanks for having us.
So Brian, why don't you spend just a little bit of time with our audience explaining to them, who is Neuromagic and what do you guys do, and how did Neuromagic come to be?
Sure. I'll start with like the founding. So we're an MIT spinout, if you will. So our two founders were at MIT, and Nir Shavat, professor, computer science at MIT, and Nir, really sort of playing to his strengths. He is a computer systems expert, written books, teaches classes, everything about software efficiency, meeting multi-core systems. And then, you back up, 8 or more years ago, and all of a sudden he was looking at cognitive, and then you start to think about like cognitive AI is emerging, and then your strengths around multi-core computing, and you put it all together. And so some of the early work that he looked at was okay, if we're trying to model the brain, which AI is very much doing, even all the way down to even technologies and algorithms, to be honest. He looked at how would you apply those types of algorithms to industry standard computer systems. And that was really what his aha moment really was around, oh my God, there's a there around algorithmic design of processing of AI models on ordinary computers, and some early ideas of some algorithms. And that was what was spun out of MIT, became CEO. And then, we've been at it for probably almost 5 years since inception. And then since then, like any organization, like obviously your first ideas are usually wrong, and then you hopefully you learn and evolve, and that's really what we've done. So we've grown to the point where we've been able to build this amazing software engine that can take what the industry calls state-of-the-art machine learning models, and it can run them at amazing speeds just on ordinary computers. And so it's really a liberation, if you will, like and focused on has an ROI of its own right, but really just focusing on like how do you allow the great advancements of AI to happen, while in the best way you can do that is to take away any friction from preventing them. And so that's really what Neural Magic was founded on, from principles. And as Jay and I always talk about, like it's not like all of a sudden you implement it and then you're done. It's like every 3 months, 4 months, we get faster, better, learn more new techniques. It's really just like the state of AI. It's really evolving really quickly. And then after I left Google, I met the company about 4 years ago. Wasn't planning on taking an operating role. I just fell in love with them. I fell in love with the people, fell in love with being able to learn about, how do you bring AI to every application? And I fell in love with what this could mean for the industry as the industry moves to another story of software eats hardware, but in this case, under AI.
Jay, I think there's always something interesting when you look back at companies that were startups and how they grew and exploded. And part of those success stories happen to be a company coming into existence at the right time. Obviously there's a ton of discussion around AI. I think AI continues to accelerate in the applications of AI. So talk a little bit about the timing of Neural Magic and how it fits within kind of where AI is, and as people really want to accelerate large language models, natural language processing, et cetera.
No, absolutely. I think what's interesting is the space, and even just the naming can add to some of the confusion in terms of where we are and where large enterprises that haven't been in this space can even begin. Data science and machine learning, the terms and the technology has been around for a while. But in the last handful of years, it's really the deep learning models and the neural networks that are really now starting to bring kind of that next level outcomes for folks. And so even in 2023, here, Gartner's recent emerging trends post that they did, right smack dab in the bullseye in the middle is computer vision, specifically computer vision at the edge. And that's a good example of where the things that we're doing and now bringing to market, being able to optimize those models and run them efficiently and at a cost-effective manner is something that we're specializing in. Whereas for the previous maybe 3 to 5 years, there's kind of been this more innovation forward mindset. We saw this with cloud. We saw this with mobile. You get the budget to do a pilot program. You go ahead and you build it. People love it. But now you got to get into production. Now you have to scale it. Now you have to show an ROI. And so I think we're just now starting to tiptoe into that domain with AI. And so when we're getting now computer vision, I think you mentioned natural language processing, Brian mentioned earlier, state-of-the-art models. That's where we're focused. Take those models, optimize them, run them on the infrastructure you already know how to manage. And so we're hoping we're hitting it at just the right time, obviously, as not everybody is trying to start to onboard and scale in production.
Yeah, so Brian, if you can dive just a little bit deeper and tell us the secret sauce of Neural Magic, and talk about what it enables at a little bit more of a detail level.
Sure. There's kind of two parts to the business, and they both integrate and produce, as Jay was saying, the magic that is Neural Magic. Probably a name that I wasn't in love with when I first joined, but wow, does it fit everything that we do? So it's pretty crazy. So the first part about it is, as people are developing their machine learning models, right? They're training them on data and they're making them purpose built for a certain specific task that they have. And then what we do is, as they're doing that, we can integrate with their training algorithms to give them not just a trained model, but we give them an optimized model. And what we mean by that is that we've really become expert at, or quite good, better than others in the industry, on introducing this notion of sparsity or pruning into these models. And what that does is, what we figured out how to do is to shrink the size of the machine learning models by 80, 90% or more, while preserving the accuracy of the model. So now you get this compressed model, still just as accurate. And then what we do is, where the next part comes in, is then we can take that model And we have a software engine that runs the model. But because we've shrunk it, the amount that we've shrunk the model by is the reduction in compute that we need to process the model. So if we reduce the model size by 80% while keeping it accurate, the amount of compute that we need is 80% less. And that's because of this software engine that we run the model on. It knows from the model by looking at it, it skips over the parts of the model that have been pruned out, if you will. So that's really the power of the optimization together with the software deployment. And then moreover, on top of that, in addition to reducing the compute, what then we do is we process the model in such a way that we keep it in cache. And so usually it's amazing that as these models are getting larger, these large language models, they're still really tiny. Even the biggest ones you're hearing about, they're very tiny from a computer architecture perspective, because they all fit inside of, the average memory even on a desktop. And we owe that thanks to the database world that we've kind of grown up our hardware with, is large memory sizes. So these models all fit in memory very easily. And then our job on the engine is to make them fit entirely within cache. And that's very different than how GPUs have to process, because GPUs, remember, have an inordinate amount of compute, which we've just said we don't really need anymore. But they don't have much memory. So to tackle these large language model problems with GPUs, you end up chaining multiple GPUs together, but not because you need more compute, just because you need more memory size.
Thank you. That's very, very helpful. I think that kind of demystifies, a little bit what the magic is in neural magic. And I think, you've come up in the concepts that you've actually created a solution for, I think are pretty cool and actually very, very relevant for companies that are learning to expand their utilization of large language models, natural language processing. Jay, the thing is, as we talked a little bit about in preparation for this discussion, the thing is that neural magic is not just a theory. You have, actual customers and success stories and real world use cases that Neural Magic has been able to partner up with customers to deliver. Could you talk just to the audience a little bit about what some of those real world examples are of application of Neural Magic as these companies go on an AI journey?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it really falls under two primary categories, and they kind of tie a little bit to my earlier commentary, where if it's someone that is now trying to get into production, and they have, for example, those computer vision workloads, some of them fall into the basic categories of things like people counting or traffic management, looking at in-store for retail and things of that more that perspective, or shelf counting, things that are on or off shelves, track of things like that. Those models, again, they exist, but it gets back to, again, being able to track those and execute them performantly. So one of my favorite quotes that I love to use from one of our large retail outlets, they've been working with us, is that they've been able to run twice as many cameras on the same amount of compute that they were using before. So they had already been doing some of this, specifically a people counting application. But by using Neural Magic, they're able to actually double the amount of cameras. So kind of a 2-to-1, that's not a bad ratio, right? On the other extreme, you have folks that have maybe been doing this for a while, particularly your batch processing. So if you think about natural language processing, ingesting a large quantity of documents or a large amount of text, doing things like named entity recognition and what have you, processing those documents at scale, sometimes maybe after hours, those kinds of things, it's just a lot of workload. There's a lot of AI now, and they're starting to see the pain and the cost of having to rack and stack and manage large GPU clusters. The expense of this is not necessarily a skill set. There's power and cooling because these things tend to run hot. So us being able to step in and take these models and be able to run them on a regular CPU infrastructure folks already know how to use, and now, of course, reduce that cost footprint. So I think that's really those kind of now starting to scale. This is really hard and expensive, or wow, the performance as I'm trying to get out of the gate. And then, of course, from a vision perspective, a lot of these folks are all thinking edge. And so now all of a sudden you start thinking, are those GPUs available across every cloud I want to use? Are they available in the regions and availability zones of those clouds that I want to use? Can I use them in the edge? Can I put them in my store? Do I have stock
Mhm.
out? So these are the situations where, again, when it's just an x86 CPU based infrastructure, now we give you that flexibility so you can at least start considering deploying these models anywhere you want.
Mhm.
So some of that's a little more vision with some folks, but we are executing there. So I think it's something that we're excited to be able to collaborate with our customers and partners on.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. And certainly other folks within your organization know, Giant Eagle is looking to partner up with Neuromagic on a particular application that is a distributed application. That is an edge-based application from a loss prevention perspective. So I'm really interested to see how that matures. Gentlemen, I want to thank you for taking a little bit of time to help us understand better what's going on at Neuromagic and the value proposition. I think just my observation is I think what you've put together is going to have great application. I look forward to watching the Neuromagic story certainly grow, and I think you're going to have a significant impact. For those in the CDO magazine readership, folks that watch this video will also be putting out an article that dives a little bit deeper into the Neuromagic story. And I would encourage you, in addition to watching the video, to spend a little bit of time reading through the article. Again, gentlemen, I want to thank you for your time today. I've had a blast doing this. And again, all the best. Thank
Thank
you.
you. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Kirk.